Imagine this. What if a single, completely accidental discovery could fundamentally rewrite almost 1,000 years of history? What if finding some old jars in a cave forever changed how we understand ancient scriptures and, well, the very context of major world religions?
It sounds like something out of a movie, doesn't it? Like an adventure plot.
Exactly. But today, we're diving deep into something very real that did just that, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So for this deep dive, we're going on the whole journey. We'll start with the incredible, almost unbelievable story of how they were found, purely by chance. Then we'll dig into the decades of work excavation, preservation, figuring out what they even said.
And what they actually contain, that's crucial. The languages, the different types of texts, it's an amazing collection.
Right. And we'll look at who might have written them, who lived there at Qumran. We'll tackle the main theories, but also the debates, the controversies.
And the myths. There have been quite a few of those swirling around.
Definitely. Our mission here is to give you the full picture, separating the solid facts from, let's say, the more speculative ideas and the outright fiction.
And you really can't overstate how significant these scrolls are. Before they surfaced, think about it. Our oldest complete copies of the Hebrew Bible were from the Middle Ages. We're talking manuscripts written maybe 1,000 years after the texts were originally composed. There was this huge gap in our knowledge.
A millennium gap. Wow.
Exactly. A millennium where we were mostly inferring textual history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, boom, they provided actual physical copies from way back from the Second Temple period. They basically compressed that 1,000-year gap into a verifiable record. It wasn't just new info, it changed how we study these ancient texts.
It gave us a direct line, essentially.
Precisely. We went from relying on much later medieval copies to having firsthand ancient evidence right there. It fundamentally altered biblical textual criticism, and it even kicked off a whole new academic field. Qumranic studies just focused on these scrolls, the site, the context. It really shows how one discovery can reshape entire fields, and the era they illuminate, the Second Temple period, was this incredibly dynamic time in Judea, lots of different Jewish groups, different ideas. The scrolls really opened up that diversity for us.
And the story of the discovery itself is just as amazing as the scrolls, isn't it? Almost legendary. It all starts serendipitously. Picture the scene. Spring 1947, we're near the Dead Sea, northwest shore, very rugged cliffs, desolate landscapes.
Stark terrain, rocky, dry, caves dotted around, baking hot.
Right. And there's a young Bedouin shepherd, a teenager, Mohammed Ahmed El-Hamed. But everyone knew him as Ed-Dib.
The wolf.
The wolf, exactly. He's out looking for a lost goat.
Right.
Or maybe, some stories say, just poking around for hidden treasure, which wasn't uncommon.
Could be a bit of both.
Could be. Anyway, he does something that changes history. He throws a rock into a cave, opening the one we now call Qumran Cave 1, and instead of just a thud, he hears pottery shattering.
Can you imagine that sound echoing out? Curiosity must have spiked instantly.
Totally. He climbs in, investigates, and finds these tall, cylindrical jars, and inside, ancient scrolls wrapped in linen.
Just sitting there for nearly 2,000 years.
This first find yielded 7 scrolls. Now, nobody knew immediately how monumental this was. They ended up being sold, kind of passed along.
Through local antiquities dealers, right, like Kondo in Bethlehem, who was a cobbler but dabbled in antiquities.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, some scrolls reached scholars, like Mar Athanasius Samuel, the Syrian Orthodox Metropolitan in Jerusalem, and Professor Sukenik at Hebrew University.
But it took time for the significance to really register.
And incredibly, archaeologists didn't even pinpoint the exact location of that first cave until 1949. It took them 2 years of searching.
That initial find just completely opened the floodgates. It created this massive buzz, a sensation. Suddenly, everyone was scrambling to find more manuscripts in the Judean desert.
A gold rush, but for ancient scrolls.
Pretty much. What followed was this intense period, roughly 1949 to 1956, this sort of race between the Bedouin, who obviously saw a chance to make money,
Understandably.
and the archaeological teams, who were racing against time to excavate properly, preserve context, and study them scientifically. It was competitive.
High stakes.
Very. And this race led to the discovery of 10 more caves right around Khirbet Qumran, that nearby ancient settlement. So 11 caves in total in that immediate area yielded scrolls. And the sheer volume found in some caves is just staggering.
Okay.
Take Cave 4, discovered in September 52. That was the mother lode.
Really?
Oh, yeah. About 3/4 of all the scroll material from the Qumran area came from Cave 4. We're talking something like 15,000 fragments from around 500 different texts.
15,000 fragments from one cave.
Just incredible, including lots of copies of important works like the Book of Jubilees, plus Tefillin, Mezuzot. Then you have Cave 11, found in early 56. That gave us some really monumental scrolls, the Paleo-Hebrew Leviticus, the Great Psalms scroll.
The one with extra songs?
It's the one. And the huge temple scroll, one of the longest ever found. Plus, we can't forget Cave 3 from 52.
Ah, the copper scroll cave.
Exactly. Totally unique. Not parchment or papyrus, but text engraved on copper sheets, listing supposed hidden treasures and other scrolls. A real outlier.
And hasn't there been a more recent discovery?
Yes. Cave 12, identified in 2017. Sadly, it seems it was looted back in the 50s, but finding it confirmed that the potential for more discoveries is still there. It shows just how extensive this ancient collection might have been.
It makes you wonder what else might be hidden out there.
It does. But stepping back, the way these scrolls were initially found, often by Bedouin motivated by sales, not scientific recording, created huge problems.
Right, the context gets lost.
Exactly. Fragments got mixed up, sometimes damaged in the process. It highlights that tension between, commercial interests and scientific preservation. It really underscores why controlled archaeological digs are so vital.
The how of discovery directly impacts what we can learn later.
Absolutely. And it doesn't stop there. The scrolls' immense value also fueled disputes. Even today, their custody is complex. Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, Israel, they all have claims based on history and territory.
So archaeology isn't just about the past, it's tied up in present-day politics, too.
Always. Cultural heritage often is. It shows these aren't just dusty old documents. They carry real weight in the modern world.
Okay, so let's metaphorically open these jars. What are we actually looking at? What kind of library was this? You mentioned the materials, mostly parchment, some papyrus.
Right, prepared animal skins mainly. A good chunk on papyrus, too. And then that one-off copper scroll.
And languages. A mix.
A mosaic, really. Hebrew is dominant, maybe 80%.
Yeah.
Then a significant amount, 15-17% in Aramaic, which was the common vernacular then. And a few in Greek, reflecting that Hellenistic influence. No Latin or Arabic found at Qumran itself, interestingly, though they've turned up elsewhere in the Judean desert.
And the writing itself, different scripts.
Oh, yes. Paleographers have identified several. The standard Hebrew block script, but also older Paleo-Hebrew cryptic scripts, Aramaic square script, Greek uncials, even some Nabatean. It helps in dating them.
And a crucial point you made earlier, mostly just consonants, right? No vowels written down yet?
Exactly. The vowel points we see in Hebrew Bibles today were added much later, hundreds of years later, by the Masoretes. So back then, the same consonants could sometimes be read or vocalized slightly differently.
Which could affect meaning or interpretation.
Potentially, yes. It gives us a glimpse into how texts might have been understood before that later standardization. It presents challenges, but also opportunities for understanding the text's history.
So this diverse collection, over 900 documents.
Yeah.
How do scholars break it down? You mentioned three main types.
That's the standard approach, yeah. Broadly, they fall into biblical manuscripts, apocryphal and pseudepigraphical texts, and sectarian texts.
Okay, let's start with the biblical ones, about 40%.
Roughly, yes. Around 230 manuscripts. These are copies of texts that eventually became part of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. And this is amazing. Every single book of the Hebrew Bible is represented, except for Esther. Maybe Nehemiah too, it's a bit debated, or maybe just not identified yet.
Wow. Every book but Esther. And these are the oldest copies known.
By far. Almost 1,000 years older than what we had before, like the Leningrad Codex. We found the Great Isaiah Scroll, 1Q Isa, the only complete biblical scroll from Qumran, all 66 chapters, and lots of copies of key books like Deuteronomy, 30 copies found. Shows how important it was to them.
So finding these ancient copies,
Yeah.
Did they match the Bible we know today? Or were there differences?
That's the fascinating part. It's both. On one hand, many scrolls are remarkably close to the Masoretic text, the standard version we've had for centuries. It shows incredible textual stability, really accurate transmission over a millennium. It was a huge confirmation.
So it proved the text was reliable.
In many ways, yes, but at the same time, the scrolls also revealed that multiple versions of biblical text were circulating back then. There wasn't just one single authoritative text yet. We see differences, small things like spelling variations, maybe different grammatical forms, but sometimes bigger things too, verses added or missing compared to later versions.
Like the Jeremiah example you mentioned.
Exactly. One scroll version of Jeremiah is about 20% shorter than the version in the Septuagint, the Greek translation. That was a big surprise. Or a Samuel scroll, for Qumran, sometimes has smoother grammar than the standard Masoretic text, making scholars wonder if it preserved an older reading in places.
And Daniel. You said it confirmed its reliability.
Yes, the presence of Daniel's scrolls dating back to the 2nd century BCE silenced critics who had argued it was written much later. It firmly established its antiquity.
So the takeaway isn't simple. They confirm the Bible's accuracy overall.
Tremendously so. But they also show a more fluid textual situation in the Second Temple period than we realized. It wasn't static.
Like seeing the text evolve in real time almost. A dynamic tradition.
Precisely. It suggests maybe the focus was more on the larger meaning and themes rather than pinning down every single word perfectly at that stage. It transforms how we view textual history.
Okay, what about the second category? Apocryphal and pseudepigraphical.
Pseudepigraphical, yeah. Tough word. These make up about 30% of the collection. They're texts from that same Second Temple period, but they didn't end up in the final Hebrew Bible canon.
So books that were important then but didn't make the final cut?
Essentially. Apocryphal means their status was questioned. Pseudepigraphical means they were often written under the name of an ancient figure like Enoch or Adam to give them authority.
Got it.
And many of these we only knew about from later translations like in Ethiopic or Greek, or maybe we didn't know them at all. The scrolls gave us the original Hebrew or Aramaic versions.
Any key examples?
Oh, definitely. The Book of Jubilees, they found 14 copies. And 1 Enoch, 11 copies. That's a lot. Also, the Book of Tobit, Wisdom of Ben Sira, Epistle of Jeremiah.
14 copies of Jubilees, 11 of Enoch. That sounds like they were pretty important to people at Qumran.
Exactly. Their prominence strongly suggests the Qumran community really valued these books, maybe even saw them as holy scripture alongside the biblical books.
Which implies the idea of a fixed biblical canon was maybe still developing. More fluid back then.
That's what it points to. Different Jewish groups seem to have had slightly different collections of sacred texts they considered authoritative.
Fascinating. Okay, third category. The sectarian texts. These were completely new.
Largely, yes. About 25–30% of the scrolls. These documents give us a direct look into the beliefs, rules, and life of a specific community, which the texts themselves call the Yahad, meaning the community.
What kind of stuff is in them?
A real variety. You've got unique biblical commentaries called Pesherim. They basically interpret prophets like Habakkuk or Isaiah as speaking directly about the community's own time and the coming end of days.
Like this ancient prophecy is about us right now.
Precisely. Very immediate, very relevant to them. Then there are apocalyptic texts describing the final battle, liturgical texts with their prayers and hymns, and really detailed rulebook.
Rulebook.
Yeah, like the community rule or manual of discipline. It lays out everything, how to join, the strict purity laws, daily schedules, penalties for breaking rules. Very structured. There's the war scroll, envisioning this cosmic battle between the sons of light, that's them, and the sons of darkness. Very dualistic worldview.
Sons of light versus sons of darkness. Intense.
Very. Also, the Thanksgiving hymns, or Hodayot, which are personal-sounding psalms reflecting their theology. And, of course, that unique copper scroll from Cave 3 with its list of hidden treasures.
It sounds like this community was really defined by these texts.
Absolutely. And this leads to a key point about the Qumran library. It wasn't just storage. It was active. These scrolls were read, studied, copied, debated.
And probably written there too, some of them.
Very likely, especially the sectarian texts. So this library wasn't static. It was alive, constantly being engaged with. It reflected and shaped their identity, their belief system.
Especially the apocalyptic worldview, the sons of light idea.
Exactly. It gives us this incredibly direct window into their mindset, their social dynamics. They weren't just preserving texts, they were living them.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Who were these people who lived at Qumran and used this library?
That's one of the biggest questions, and where the archaeology of the site comes in. Qumran itself is this settlement on a terrace overlooking the Dead Sea, quite isolated.
You mentioned it was occupied roughly 150 BCE to 68 CE?
That's the main period, yeah. And it ended abruptly, violently destroyed by the Romans during the first Jewish revolt around 68 CE.
And the excavations by Père de Vaux, what did they find there?
A complex set of buildings, communal structures, a really impressive water system channels, reservoirs, and lots of ritual baths, mikvehs.
Indicating a focus on purity.
A strong focus, yes. Also a large assembly hall, likely for meals and meetings, a pottery workshop.
Where they probably made the scroll jars.
Very likely. And crucially, a room identified as a scriptorium, a place set up for writing and copying texts, with inkwells found there.
So evidence of writing happening on site.
Strong evidence, yes. And a large cemetery nearby, over 1,000 graves. All points to a settled, organized community living there for generations.
And looking at the site, the isolation, the baths, the communal rooms, the scriptorium, it suggests a deliberate lifestyle, right? Not just a random village.
Absolutely. The layout reflects the ideology found in the scrolls. It points to a highly structured separatist group, deeply motivated by their religious beliefs and practices. The archaeology and the text really reinforce each other.
Okay, so who were they? What's the leading theory? This is where the Essene hypothesis comes in, right? The idea that the Qumran folks were Essenes, or at least closely related.
That's been the dominant scholarly view for a long time, yes. Josephus, the Jewish historian, described 4 main Jewish philosophies back then: Pharisees, Sadducees, Zealots, and Essenes. The Qumran community seems to fit the Essene description remarkably well.
How so? What's the evidence?
Several strong lines. First, geography. Pliny the Elder, a Roman writer, described the Essenes living on the west side of the Dead Sea near Engedi. That's exactly where Qumran is.
Okay, location fits.
Second, chronology. The scrolls date from around the 3rd century BCE to 68 CE. Josephus says the Essenes flourished from about 150 BCE to 70 CE. The timelines matched almost perfectly, right up to the Roman destruction.
Geography, chronology,
Yeah.
check. What else?
The clincher for many is the shared beliefs and practices. Josephus's detailed descriptions of Essene life overlap incredibly well with what we read in the sectarian scrolls, like the community rule.
Like what specifically?
Well, common ownership of property. Essenes renounced private wealth, shared everything. Qumran texts emphasize communal resources.
Okay.
Isolation and asceticism. Essenes lived apart, practiced simplicity. Qumran is isolated. Ritual purity. Essenes practiced frequent immersion. Qumran has all those mikvehs.
The baths, right.
Disciplined life. Essenes focused on study, worship, work. Qumran texts mandate constant Torah study. Strict adherence to laws. Both groups were meticulous about religious law and had their own extra rules.
Just sounds very so.
Apocalyptic beliefs. Essenes expected a final battle. Qumran texts, like the War Scroll, are all about the sons of light versus sons of darkness.
Right, that dualism again.
Abandonment of the Jerusalem temple. Essenes withdrew due to perceived corruption. Qumran texts are highly critical of the temple establishment. Rigorous initiation. Both have long trial periods for new members.
Wow, that's a lot of parallels. This seems pretty convincing.
It is very compelling, which is why it's the majority view. But it's not universally accepted. Scholarship is rarely that simple.
So there are challenges or alternative ideas?
Definitely. Some scholars propose other identities. Dr. Lawrence Schiffman, for example, championed a Sadducee theory.
Sadducees. Weren't they the priestly aristocracy, often associated with the temple the Essenes supposedly rejected?
That's the common picture, but Schiffman argues certain Qumran texts, particularly one called MMT, align better with known Sadducean views on things like the temple calendar and specific purity laws. It's a complex argument based on legal interpretations in the texts.
Interesting. Any other theories?
There's the Jerusalem library theory. The idea here is that Qumran wasn't the source of all the scrolls, but more like a hiding place.
So scrolls were brought from Jerusalem, maybe from various libraries or groups, to protect them from the Romans around 68 CE.
Exactly. This implies the collection represents a broader slice of Judean society, not just one specific sect living at Qumran. Some even question the whole monastic community interpretation of the site itself, suggesting it might have been a fortress or a villa or something else entirely.
So challenging the basic interpretation of the archaeology, too.
Right. And then there's a more cautious view. Just call them an unknown Jewish sect. Acknowledge they were distinct, but avoid definitively labeling them Essenes or Sadducees without more explicit proof.
And what about criticisms of the Essene theory itself? You said there were discrepancies?
Some scholars point them out. Josephus describes Essenes as generally pacifist, but the War Scroll from Qumran is very militant. Is that a contradiction or just a different faction or an end times exception?
It's debated.
Josephus emphasizes Essene celibacy, but some Qumran texts mention women or rules related to marriage, suggesting maybe not all members were celibate or that the community included families. Again, interpretations vary.
So not a perfect match with Josephus on every single detail.
Not perfectly seamless, no. These nuances keep the debate alive.
And what about new research? Is anything changing the picture recently?
Absolutely. Cutting-edge stuff is adding layers. AI, for instance. There's a model called Enoch being used to analyze handwriting styles and date scrolls.
AI dating scrolls.
Yeah. And it's suggesting many scrolls might be older than we thought, some maybe even predating the main occupation of the Qumran site.
Which would support the idea that not all scrolls were written at Qumran.
Exactly. It leans towards the idea of Qumran being, at least partly, a collection point, receiving texts from elsewhere.
And DNA. You mentioned DNA analysis.
Right. Analyzing the animal DNA from the parchment fragments, they've found some fragments come from sheep whose genetics suggest they weren't local to the Qumran area, implying the skins, or maybe the finished scrolls, were brought in from other parts of Judea.
Wow. So, multiple lines of new evidence pointing towards a more complex origin for the library, not just one isolated group writing everything themselves.
That seems to be the direction things are moving. It doesn't necessarily disprove the Essene connection for the core community living at Qumran, but it suggests the library itself might have been more diverse, more of a collection. It highlights how interdisciplinary modern research is: archaeology, texts, AI, DNA, all working together.
It really paints a picture of scholarship as a living process, constantly refining the picture. Okay, let's pivot to the impact. We've touched on it. But how exactly did finding these scrolls revolutionize our understanding, first, of Second Temple Judaism?
It was transformative. Before the scrolls, our view of Judaism in that period, say 500 BCE to 70 CE, was often shaped by later sources, rabbinic writings, Josephus, the New Testament. These sometimes gave a more unified impression or focused on dominant groups like the Pharisees.
Right, maybe smoothed over the diversity.
Somewhat, yes. The scrolls blew that open. They revealed this incredibly vibrant, complex landscape. Multiple Jewish groups, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and probably others coexisting, often competing, each with very distinct beliefs, interpretations of scripture, ways of life.
So it wasn't monolithic at all.
Not even close. The scrolls gave us unfiltered first-hand voices from within some of these movements, especially the Qumran group. We could suddenly see their internal debates, their rules, their hopes, their critiques of others. It was like finding a Rosetta Stone for Jewish sectarianism.
Clarifying differences that were maybe only hinted at before.
Exactly. And it hugely impacted how we study the Bible itself, the textual criticism aspect we talked about.
Right. The dual impact confirming the overall accuracy of the later Masoretic text.
Yes, finding manuscripts 1,000 years older that were so similar was a massive validation of the careful transmission process. It silenced a lot of skepticism about whether the Bible text had been drastically altered over time.
But also revealing that variety, those different versions circulating back then.
Precisely. The spelling differences, grammatical variants, the different lengths of Jeremiah, the better readings in Samuel. It showed the text wasn't frozen yet. It was still somewhat dynamic.
So it complicated the picture in a good way, making it more accurate.
Absolutely. It gave textual criticism so much more data to work with. It confirmed the core reliability while revealing a fascinating, more complex history of the text development. A huge leap forward.
And what about the impact on understanding early Christianity? Obviously a hot topic.
A very important one. The scrolls provide invaluable context for the world Jesus and the first Christians lived in. They illuminate the Jewish background of Christianity, the ideas, the language, the expectations that were current then.
You mentioned parallels earlier, things like baptism, communal meals.
Yes, scholars quickly noticed intriguing similarities. Qumran had rituals of purification by water, echoing baptism. They had communal meals, maybe resonating with the Last Supper or early church meals. Shared property, like in the early Jerusalem church described in Acts.
And the apocalyptic
A
outlook.
big one. That expectation of God intervening, a final cosmic battle between good and evil, that's prominent in Qumran texts and in parts of the New Testament.
And this is crucial. Do the scrolls mention Jesus or John the Baptist? Any New Testament figures?
That's the key distinction, and the answer is unequivocally no. There is zero direct mention of Jesus, John the Baptist, Peter, Paul, anyone from the New Testament. No overlapping characters apart from Old Testament figures.
So no Christianity code hidden in the scrolls?
Absolutely not. And no evidence the New Testament writers knew about Qumran's specific sectarian writings either. Jesus' ministry was mainly in Galilee, far from Qumran.
So how do we explain the similarities then, if not direct influence?
The consensus is they reflect a common stream within Judaism. Both the Qumran community and early Christians emerged from the same general Jewish environment of the Second Temple period. They shared scriptures, some interpretive methods, some cultural practices, some apocalyptic ideas that were just in the air at the time.
Like drawing from the same well, but digging different channels.
That's a good analogy. Take that list of miracles in the Qumran text, 4Q521, healing the blind, raising the dead. It sounds a lot like Jesus' description of his ministry in Luke's gospel.
Right.
But it seems both are drawing on shared interpretations of prophecies in Isaiah about what the Messiah would do. Not one copying the other, but both using the same prophetic source material.
That makes sense. And the scrolls show different ideas about the Messiah around too.
Absolutely. Qumran seems to have expected two messiahs, one priestly, one royal, from David's line. This highlights the diversity of messianic expectation back then. It wasn't one single idea.
Which helps explain why Jesus' message resonated with some, but was rejected by others. It fits some expectations, but challenged others.
Exactly. It shows the complex religious landscape Jesus entered. The scrolls give us that context in a way we never had before.
Let's talk about preservation and putting these things back together. It sounds like a nightmare. First, how did they even survive for 2,000 years?
It really is remarkable. The key was the environment inside those caves near the Dead Sea. Extremely dry, stable temperature, dark. It acted like a natural preservative for the fragile parchment and papyrus, a true miracle of preservation.
But then they were taken out of that stable environment.
And that's where the problems began, exposing them to humidity, fluctuating temperatures, light, and just basic human handling after millennia. It made them incredibly vulnerable.
And those early conservation efforts actually made things worse. You mentioned tape.
Tragically, yes. In the early days, before modern conservation science really developed, scholars trying to piece fragments together used, well, regular adhesive tape like Scotch tape.
Okay.
And they sandwiched fragments between plates of window glass. Over time, the tape aged badly, the adhesives oozed, the pressure caused darkening, brittleness, even gelatinization of the parchment. Some texts were damaged irreversibly and made illegible.
So, trying to help, they accidentally harmed them.
With the best intentions, but yes. Attempts later, in the 60s and 70s, to undo the damage sometimes compounded the problems. It's a cautionary tale.
How are they treated now? Much more carefully, I assume.
Oh, incredibly carefully. Meticulous documentation of every fragment, high-risk photography, climate-controlled storage mimicking cave conditions. When they're exhibited, it's for short periods, like 3 months on display, then at least a year resting in the dark. Maximum protection now.
And the decipherment, piecing together 15,000 fragments. How on earth did they even start?
Imagine the world's hardest jigsaw puzzle, with most pieces missing, no picture, and fragments from 1,000 different puzzles all mixed together.
Doesn't sound fun.
It was incredibly painstaking. The initial method relied heavily on paleography studying the handwriting. Ancient scribes, like people today, had distinct handwriting styles. So scholars would sort fragments based on who wrote them, grouping pieces likely from the same scroll, then trying to find physical joins, matching edges, patterns, text flow, slow, meticulous work.
And technology has helped with that too.
Massively. Infrared imaging can reveal ink that's faded to invisibility. Multispectral imaging helps see details on damaged parchment, differentiate layers. 3D scanning helps reconstruct things virtually.
And that virtual unwrapping. For scrolls too damaged to open.
Exactly, like the Engedi scroll, which was basically a lump of charcoal after a fire. Using high-resolution CT scans, they could digitally flatten the layers and read the text inside without physically destroying it. It revealed a text of Leviticus. Absolutely revolutionary.
Amazing. And the DNA is helping piece them together too.
Yes, the newest tool. By analyzing the animal DNA, they can confirm if two fragments came from the same sheepskin, for instance, meaning they likely belong to the same scroll, even if they don't physically join, or prove they came from different animals, helping sort the puzzle. It can even suggest, as we said, if the animal originated far from Qumran.
So technology keeps unlocking more secrets. Now, about the publication. It wasn't exactly speedy, was it? There was controversy.
Not speedy is an understatement. It took decades, from the 50s well into the 90s, for all the fragments to be officially published. And for much of that time, access was restricted to a small international team of scholars.
Which led to frustration, accusation.
Oh, yes. Major academic controversy. Scholars outside the small circle felt excluded, progress was too slow, and this delay, this secrecy almost, it fueled a lot of speculation and wild theories among the public.
The conspiracy theories, like the Vatican conspiracy.
That was a big one, yeah. Books came out claiming the Vatican was pressuring the largely Catholic initial research team to suppress scrolls that supposedly contained damaging secrets about Christian origins.
Secrets like what? Jesus wasn't unique? Or didn't exist?
Things along those lines. Or that the scrolls proved Christianity was just a derivative of the Essene movement. These theories claimed evidence was being ignored or misinterpreted deliberately.
But once everything was published,
they fell apart. Scholars examining the full corpus of texts showed these conspiracy claims were based on misreadings, selective evidence, or just plain misinformation. There were no bombshells undermining Christianity.
What about other myths? That the scrolls did mention Jesus, maybe in code?
Those circulated too. Some rather imaginative interpretations claimed to find coded references to Jesus, John the Baptist, arguing they were actually active at Qumran. These have been thoroughly debunked by mainstream scholarship. The scrolls simply don't mention them.
And the opposite claim, that the scrolls disprove the Bible because of the textual differences.
Another myth, and kind of ironic. While the scrolls do show textual variants, which is fascinating, their overwhelming testimony is to the Bible's remarkable stability and accurate transmission over centuries, as we discussed. They confirm more than they contradict.
So how did the publication logjam finally break?
Public pressure mounted, other scholars got impatient. Eventually, in 1991, the Huntington Library in California unilaterally released photos of the unpublished fragments they held. Soon after, the Israel Antiquities Authority officially opened access and committed to accelerated publication.
And now they're accessible online.
Yes, thankfully. The Israel Museum, with Google, created the Dead Sea Scrolls digital project. High-resolution, searchable images of most of the scrolls are online for anyone to see. Full transparency now.
Which hopefully puts the conspiracies to rest.
Mostly, though some myths have long lives. But the data is out there now, and the research definitely hasn't stopped. It's still a very active field. New technologies keep pushing things forward.
Like the AI dating we mentioned.
Exactly. AI, like the Enoch model refining dates, suggesting older origins for some scrolls. That has big implications for the Qumran site's role. AI might also help decipher damaged or cryptic texts in the future.
And archaeologically, is there hope of finding more scrolls? Cave 12 wasn't that long ago.
2017, yes. Even though it was looted, its discovery proved there could still be more caves out there with scrolls, or fragments at least. The potential is still there. Excavations and surveys continue.
And digital preservation ensures they last.
That's key. Creating high-quality digital copies safeguards them from further physical deterioration and ensures scholars worldwide can study them long into the future.
It raises that question again. What else might we find? What might the next technological leap reveal?
It keeps the field exciting. It reminds us that history isn't static. Our understanding constantly evolves.
So let's try to wrap up this deep dive. The Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
An absolutely unparalleled discovery.
Definitely. Found by chance, starting in 1947. Over 900 manuscripts recovered from 11 caves near Qumran.
Written mostly on parchment and papyrus, mainly in Hebrew and Aramaic.
Covering biblical texts, apocryphal works, and unique sectarian writings from the Second Temple period.
Shedding incredible light on the Qumran community, likely Essenes who lived there from around 150 BCE to 68 CE.
Revolutionizing our understanding of Jewish diversity in that era, and fundamentally advancing biblical textual criticism.
Confirming the Bible's textual stability while also revealing its fascinating variations.
And providing crucial context for early Christianity, showing shared roots and ideas within Judaism, but no direct link to Jesus or the New Testament figures themselves.
And let's be crystal clear on the debunked stuff.
Yeah.
No Vatican conspiracy to hide scrolls.
Nope. Completely unfounded.
No secret codes revealing Jesus was an Essene or anything like that.
False. No mention of NT figures.
And they don't disprove the Bible. If anything, they largely confirm its careful transmission.
Correct. Those are myths.
But the conversation continues. Debates about who exactly wrote all the scrolls, where they all came from.
Right. The Essene theory for the Qumran community is strong, but the library itself seems more complex now. Maybe a collection from various sources, with some scrolls older than the site. New tech like AI and DNA keeps adding nuance.
Scholarship is ongoing, dynamic.
Always.
It's incredible, isn't it? These scrolls connect us so directly to people living 2,000 years ago. Their beliefs, their rules, their scriptures. And it shows that history, our knowledge, it's never set in stone. A chance discovery by a shepherd continues to unfold with new technology peeling back layers century after century. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what other historical facts that we take for granted might be shifted or nuanced or even overturned by the next discovery or the next breakthrough in analysis.
A humbling thought.
It really is. It reminds us that understanding the past is always a work in progress.